Welcome to Athletes to Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey. I'm Rob Finkelstein, founder and CEO of Alumni Direct, and we've created a platform to help alumni network and connect through their affinity groups. So whether it's athletes, it could be college alumni, it could be business alumni associations, fraternities, sororities, we bring them all together to make it easy for them to connect. And this show is all about we talk to former collegiate professional athletes, and we talk about their journey in transitioning out of sports, which is a major issue today. There's a lot of problems on both the financial literacy, mental health side, and Erika is an expert on the mental health side, so we're going to get a good coverage on that. But the whole idea is to teach and inspire athletes that there's life after sports. So Erika Fay is with us. How you doing, Erika?
I'm good, Rob. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So Erika played water polo at Purdue. So this is my first one.
Mm-hmm.
I've had swimmers, we've had wrestlers, football players. So water polo, thank you for being the first notice for that.
My pleasure. And women's water polo, no less.
Water polo. She's got a good story with that she'll share with us. So, and then after that, once she got out of college and started transitioning out of sports, she is a marathon runner and run multiple marathons, which she'll talk a little bit about. And then she got into different types of therapy, family therapy, marriage counseling, things of that nature. But ultimately now today, she got into coaching, and she has, I said I'd look at it, I have to look at it again, but it's maximum achievement coaching. And she works with a lot of different athletes and just helping them and their families in their journey. So always like to talk about when you were growing up, Erika, playing sports. Tell me, kind of what you did and how it shaped you ultimately.
Yeah, I had kind of a twisty-turvy road with sports. So when I was super little, and I still have it today, but I had really bad asthma. Now it's well controlled. But I was in and out of the hospital multiple times per year, hospitalizations, like not just ER visits, but like inpatient hospitalizations, lungs collapse, things like that. And my parents, God bless them, they kind of forced me into playing sports so that I could build up my lung capacity. And so they had me doing things like swimming, things that you could, breath control was like major in terms of, kind of getting through the sport. So swimming, pretty much every single like ball sport, which I was not good at all. And then, so I actually started to notice, and then we would have to run the mile in grade school and things like that. And there were other kids who had asthma that would sit out. And my parents were like, no, you're not sitting out. You're going to run it. And I honestly think that sports gave me my health. I think it taught me breath control. I think I learned how to kind of get myself to a point and push past it. And there were obviously, that was a growing edge because I was sometimes finishing a basketball game and then being rushed to the hospital. But it ultimately, that's what I credit my health and my ability to kind of act as if I don't have asthma because of sports. And so that was one of the reasons why, and I know we'll get to this in a second, but one of the reasons why when I stopped playing water polo, I knew I wanted to go into something else because I was a little bit worried that like my lung capacity would kind of go downhill. And I'm thinking like there has to be something else. So I credit all of that to my experience with sports.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, I give you credit because I think now as you're telling the whole story just about being a marathon runner and having asthma, that just seems like it seems like it'd be kind of a recipe for disaster. So I guess to your point, just building it up over time, it was probably really helped you.
Yeah, definitely. And I did 2 Ironmans too. So when I first started marathon running, I used to run with my inhaler, and in the Ironman, I was like, shoot, how am I going to do this? So I actually got myself to a place where I didn't need my inhaler. So I don't need to do races with it. But when I first started marathon running, I did have it with me. So yeah, I mean, you can see the progress in terms of the lung capacity and the ability, that my body now has to be able to kind of show up the way I want it to show up versus what was happening when I was little.
Yeah, that's great. So we talk a lot about, when we're talking about athletes transitioning to sports, and as I mentioned in the beginning, it is a major problem today. But when you were at school, was there any education that you saw from the university around helping athletes as they transition out of sports, either at within the school itself or maybe like alumni also.
So I'm going to date myself here, but I graduated from Purdue in 95. So it was a while back. And no, not that I was aware of, in terms of during the
Right.
actual like school
Sure.
year and that whole curriculum. I have seen since then, there are lots of alumni opportunities for connection and things like that. But not back in the day, not in
Right.
1995. And I know that was quite a while ago. So I
I went to
know.
school before you did, so but so 87 since you shared yours. But anyway, yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's definitely changed and it's gotten better. But I think it's something that is important. And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times you hear about in the alumni space too, like these athletes, whether it be from coming out of college sports or coming out of professional sports. Sometimes there's that lack of education because they were so focused on their sport, and even if the schools
Totally.
did have stuff, they might not have necessarily participated. So I think it's real important, and
Mm-hmm.
we're trying to do things like that to help. So
Absolutely.
yeah, it's and we'll I think as we kind of talk just about some of the things you're doing today, uh, some of that will definitely play in and probably into maybe if they might have gotten better education or things like that, it might have changed a little bit the trajectory of maybe some of the potential issues they have today. But
Mm-hmm.
another area that's real important to us and Alumni Direct is it's all about networking, connecting, and that
Yeah.
also that alumni experience. But I guess the first thing kind of tapping into alumni. So like you said, back when you were at school, maybe there was some alumni engagement. When I'm talking about alumni engagement, it's more about, in this case, talking about maybe athletes coming back to the school, and not
Hmm.
necessarily in a sense of like, hey, there's a homecoming game and they're just there, or a golf tournament, but more about being maybe in that mentor capacity. Did you see any of that when you were in school, or if not then? Do you see any of that today, based on some of the conversations you have with other athletes?
Well, I think because of the nature of like Purdue being Big Ten and being kind of football heavy, even though when I was there they weren't that good, but I saw it with the football team, but not necessarily other sports, and somewhat with the basketball team too, because our basketball team was actually good when I was there. Glenn Robinson was on the team at that time, but so like those two like headliner sports, I think those were the ones that it was pretty clear like those were the premier sports. Those are the
Right.
ones that got most of the attention. And I mean, I think that's just the nature of going to like a Big Ten school. So, or at least it was in the 90s. So yeah, I mean, there were definitely some alumni things around the basketball players and the football players, but not necessarily other sports. And I hung out with a lot of swimmers too. But I don't know. They had an alumni swim meet where some of the alums would come back and they would do like a swimming, but there wasn't anything that I was aware of that was like organized beyond something like that.
Right, and I think it's a challenge sometimes too. I've talked to some other athletes, and I remember I was talking to an agent, and her player had played in the NFL, had success, but when he wanted to kind of go back and give back to the college, and not that they shunned him, but it wasn't like something that was like, oh, hey, come on back. And I think that's something that's
Mm-hmm.
important. I think alumni getting involved and helping out, and it should be welcomed. And then part of what I've seen or what I've heard the problem is sometimes it's the fact of like changes in maybe the changes in the athletic department, new athletic directors, or it
Yep.
could be coaching staff, and you've got a new coaching staff that probably when you were there, your coach would do anything to help out, maybe in like in your future, like for any sport for that matter. But
Yeah.
once they leave, and then a new generation of coaches come in, they might kind of forget the alumni, and they're kind of more concentrated on the people that they coached.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I think. I mean, it's so cool what you're doing, Rob, because I think, at least from what I've seen with doing some work with the swim team at Purdue, I mean, the coaches have a gazillion different things that they're working with and try, especially when they don't have help with recruiting and things like that. It's like the alumni are last on their list because they're trying to like, get new talent in and new student athletes. And so, yeah, I think it's just, they've got a lot, unless they have like a full coaching staff underneath them that can kind of support some of the alums. I think it can be really, really overwhelming for coaches to be able to kind of wear that hat too.
Yeah, and I agree. And I mean, that's something like you said, we're trying to, ideally go into athletic departments and with kind of, I always call it the SWAT team, but basically a team of resource partners that would be mental health, financial literacy, career services, things of that nature that can go in and become that, maybe that, kind of that partner to help the athletes out. And not only the current athletes, but again, bringing those alumni athletes back and giving them a chance at getting some of these resources that they didn't have access to when they were playing.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's so awesome.
Yeah. So one of the things that we talk about as well is just the whole networking, connecting. I mean, obviously, we can talk about, the world you're in today, and I'm sure, like me, you probably use it a lot, but talk about the importance of networking and connecting and doing it while you're still playing.
Oh, I think it's so important. And I mean, you're like the master networker. So I know you probably know more about this than I do. But I think it's so powerful when athletes can use their current situation to connect with other athletes. So like whether it's to promote, something that's important to them, or to connect with other people who are, maybe a little bit more advanced in terms of their graduation or what they're doing next. And also, I think it helps the athlete not only connect and create a community, but I also think it helps the athlete in terms of, and this is where my psychology background comes in, but in terms of like really feeling more grounded in like their identity, because I think it's so easy for all of us as athletes to kind of define ourselves by our sport and what we do. And especially if you're going pro, or, when that ends, it's like, well, who am I? But if you have that network of people who are athletes and something else, or, they're contributing to something larger than them, even if that's, that they decide they want to have a family and that's what they're contributing to. I think it's just there's so many levels that it's so powerful on, not just having a network where you might be able to be introduced to another career or something else that you might want to do, but also just in terms of the psychological impact that having that community really allows for.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, I encourage people to network and connect, and, especially, when they are playing. I mean, I was talking to one agent, and he said that, what happens is most athletes are so focused on the sport, and really the best time to network and connect is when they're playing. And
Yeah.
all of a sudden, if they don't do that, they're done. And like, okay, what's next? And to your point, I think a lot of athletes get hung up on that whole thing, which we'll talk more about, is looking at themselves as a sport. And I think it depends also on, the I guess the attitude you have, I guess, is important with that whole space. So let's I'm going to shift over to kind of the hot topic today in college sports and even in high school sports,
Yeah.
is NIL, name, image, likeness. And give me your thoughts, just both positive and negative, from what you're seeing. Obviously, like when you were in sport, when I was in sport, it wasn't around. I mean, I joke around, I guess, in a sense, the boosters were the NIL back then.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's now, but give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely benefits to it. I think it is, this is obviously my opinion. So I know people
Sure.
are well more versed in NIL than I am. But I mean, I do think that there's some merit in not just having the school benefit from, who you are and what you actually provide for the school. And having that, something is going to the athlete by means of that. But I also think one of the things that I have seen, which maybe people have talked about previously on your podcast, but it can, I think, create sometimes some disparity in terms of a team culture. Sometimes, depending on what school you go to and what kind of celebrity you kind of have, there are like instances where some athletes bring in more money than their coach, and then they don't want to listen to their coach. Or there's one athlete who is making a lot of money, and then the team members get, a little bit like resentful or irritated or whatever. So I think there's a lot of different layers to it. And so that's why, when people usually ask me about NIL, I'm like, oh man, it's so loaded. There's so much I don't know. These are just the things that I've seen that I think can be potential pitfalls, but I also think it's completely valid that the athletes should be able to benefit from the things that they're doing. So I don't know if that's a clear answer.
Yeah, no, it is. And I mean, you're right. Everybody has different opinions on it. I think, I also do another podcast called NIL for You, and it's all about education, because I think that's the key is that there's a need for education. I mean, there's, between the athletes, their families, the coaches, you hear a lot of stories. I always bring them up on different podcasts of just, ways that potentially hurt. I mean, athletes, like there's one story where there's an athlete, he got an NIL deal, like $40,000 deal, and ended up spending all the money with his friends, which I can see that, understandable, younger kids or whatever are like that.
Yep.
But what happened though was, because of getting that 40,000, it brought the family's income higher to where he lost his scholarship, and something like that should never happen. So there's definitely there's a need for education out there, and then also you brought up some good points about people playing together, where one person's making a lot of money, and how do the other people feel about it. One thing that has been interesting is talking to some of the female athletes. It seems like in women's sports, it's been a little bit different, where it's more been spread out amongst the team. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are some female athletes doing really well, making a lot of money, but there's also teams that are kind of working together and getting this NIL money, which is great.
That is, and I don't know if it's. I don't want to say that it's a female male thing, but I think, because there's definitely cattiness on the female side. I'm not going to say, but I think also just because female sports hasn't been as like high profile as male sports, I think women are more used to kind of pulling together and supporting each other. But I mean, I could be way off on that. It's just something, that seems like it might play a role.
Yeah, I think you're right about that, and it kind of leads into the next thing we'll kind of talk about, transitioning out of sports, and your transition out of sports. But one of the things that was, I guess, interesting, kind of along the lines we were just talking about, is I think the biggest challenge is the mindset. Obviously when you're still the athlete at college, and because of some of the inequalities in women's sports, knowing that they're not going to get this major payday like maybe the NFL player might get, or Major League Baseball, NBA player. So they tend to be the female athletes might be a little more grounded in knowing, like, here's the next steps, and the transition might not be as hard. Like for me, I was a runner in college. I got hurt my sophomore year, but I also knew that I was I was a varsity runner, but I wasn't good enough to ever be an Olympian. So that transition for me wasn't hard, and I can see the same thing there. So let's talk about your transition out of water polo and kind of getting into the real world per se once you were done with college.
Yeah, I mean, similarly to you, I knew I wasn't good enough, and actually, there was nowhere to go. We were signing petitions, and I wouldn't have made the team anyways, to get women's water polo be an Olympic sport. So that wasn't. It was kind of like you're done after college. So we had the awareness that it was coming to an end. I do remember my final match, just being aware that this was it, and like actually laying back in the natatorium in the water and just like looking around and being like, okay, this is it. And like really just taking it all in. And I'm really grateful that I had that like presence of mind to do that, because that experience really sticks out in my head. And then, like getting out of the pool for the last time and all of it, it was very, it was kind of burned in my memory. But I also knew that I needed to figure something else out if I wanted to continue to do something athletic. And that's when, thanks to my mom, who ran a marathon, I think when she was 40, I was like, oh, she could do it, I could do it. So then I started the marathon running. But I'm also grateful that I did have a clear path in terms of what I wanted to do with my career, because I think that also really helped. So I didn't have my identity totally wrapped up. Now, I will say that you take away sport from me, and I know that's a huge part of my identity, but it wasn't everything. And so I think that was really helpful in terms of my transition and the fact that I knew there was really nowhere else to go after I was done. So
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, and the parallel, like as you were brought up with mine as well, is just kind of knowing the next steps. And I think the challenge is that a lot of athletes, like you talked about earlier, tend to think of themselves as the sport and not as the person. And so, that's what we really want to make an impact in helping these athletes as they transition out. So, because you're kind of in this space and you do coaching and all that with athletes, give some advice to athletes of just when their sport is done, whether it be from a collegiate level or professional level, kind of guide the athletes on some thoughts of how to get through it quicker and more successfully.
Well, I think what you said in terms of the alumni support when they're still playing, or like creating a network when they're still playing, like to me, my business, I started out wanting to help athletes in transition, and it's actually evolved to help athletes while they're still competing, because it really does lay the groundwork for, we are looking at things like, how else do you define yourself besides, being an athlete? Like, what else is important to you? So we go through things like, and this is something that, anyone who's listening to this can kind of take these exercises and work with them a little bit, but like, kind of looking at what your qualities and skills are, not just like, oh, I got A in this class or whatever, I majored in this, but really like what people tell you you're good at, or perhaps even in your sport, if you were a leader, or if you were really good at anticipating, or all of those things are actually like transferable skills. And I think getting an awareness of that can be one of the foundations for actually looking at the bigger question of like, who am I really? And then also taking a look at your core values. And this is another big thing that I work with my clients on a lot, is just really getting some clarity, at least 5 core values that without them, you just don't feel like you. So a core value could be something like, being integrity. So like doing what you say, saying what you mean, showing up when you say you're going to show up. And I'm using that because that's one of my core values, but integrity, family, fun. That's an amazing core value. So like relationships, loyalty, financial freedom, like all of these different things are core values. And so really as an athlete, if you're retired or that your career is coming to an end, whether you're collegiate, high school, or even professional, having an understanding of like, what are my core values? Like what if you took away, would I feel like there's a huge hole and something's missing? Or how do I make decisions? Like what guides my decision making? Because a lot of times if you take a look at that, you'll see there are some core values underlying those things. So those are 2 huge components, I think, of getting clear on, who you are beyond your sport. And then another thing is just taking a look at kind of the legacy you want to leave. And it might sound morbid, but really when you think about like what you want to be remembered for, is it because you scored so-and-so, however much, or depending on your sport, or, is it because you made an impact on, hunger or children in foster care, or, perhaps contributed to the earth in some way? There's usually, and this is something that I've seen in every single one of my clients, and this might be, I don't think this is specific to my experience, but I guess I can't really speak to any other experience, but every single one of my clients, whether it's therapy setting or coaching setting, has had this kind of pull. And I think this is part of the amazing thing about the human spirit, this pull to contribute in some way, shape, or form. And so really when you tap into that, it takes you outside of just, this is what I do, and the box that we can easily find ourselves in. When we see ourselves like as a part of something, or, I mean, I think that's part of sports too. Like we see ourselves as part of a team, or we see ourselves as, a Boilermaker in my case, or whatever. but really having this, like, my legacy, like, what do I want to contribute to? What's important to me? Is it in the environment? Is it family? Is it, kids? Is it animals? Whatever it is. But I think that kind of gives the broader spectrum, and really is an opportunity for us to begin to think of ourselves in different ways. And that's something that I think is a really powerful exercise, especially if you're feeling kind of lost.
Yeah, no, and that's great. I mean, hopefully, and again, as people, listen to or watch this podcast, I mean, that's just great advice that Eric gave, and that's what we want to do. I mean, it's all, like I said, it's all about teaching aspiring athletes that there is life after sports, and those are some great tips. So, even kind of one of the things you mentioned about transferable skills. This is something. It was interesting. I had one of my former podcast guests. He was a football player in college, and ultimately he was done after that, but he went into the business world, and he, worked his way up and became a very successful CEO for some large companies. And the one thing that his message was to implore athletes that use your skill set. I mean, the team building, the leadership skills, just the perseverance, hard work, because people want to hire athletes because of all those skill sets. So instead of being wrapped up in the world of, okay, I'm done, I was a football player, now what? Like, think about how you can take those skills into other areas, which you kind of alluded to there, which I think is great.
Yeah. So with the transferable skills, one of the things that I've seen that I think is really sad is so many athletes feel like they don't have transferable skills. But it's absolutely the case that they do. And, when you can kind of start to pick apart, like, what makes them successful in their sport, I think that's one of the things that can, then they start to kind of realize, like, oh, well, wait a second, this is actually really possible and to be used in the business world, or whatever world they want to go into after sports.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So let's talk about, so once you transition out of water polo, we kind of already have been talking about it, but talk about, so you got into, family therapy, and then ultimately leading up to what you're doing today. So talk a little bit about, your experience in coaching athletes, and, obviously we're not getting any specifics, but maybe some of the challenges that they have, and solutions that you might bring. And then ultimately we'll talk about, what you're doing today with your business.
Yeah, well, when I started working with athletes, I started to see, like, oh, well, these are my people, because they take what you're saying and they do something with it. So I think that's another transferable skill, is being able to listen, and actually, if something resonates with you, integrate it, not just hear it, but actually take action on, on what it is. And so uh, my my experience with being in the therapy arena was, first of all, I was getting a little bit stifled, feeling like I wanted to have a bigger impact. And there's only so many hours in a day. And we've called them like button chair hours, where you can see so many people. And I just really wanted, because I felt like once I started seeing these athletes and their spouses, I was just noticing that there were these needs and these gaps that I just wanted to be able to fill. And so that's what led me to get certified as a coach. And then I opened my coaching business, which is a different business than my therapy business, because there's a ton of ethics associated with therapy, and I just wanted it to be cleaner. But really, the idea was to serve and support athletes as they are transitioning away from sport, or if they have already transitioned and are struggling. So obviously there's a lot of mental health issues that could, kind of arise by means of transition. So that's a component. But I think, like we talked about earlier, when we start to address, like, the core of your identity and how you see yourself, I think sometimes, when you feel a little bit more grounded in that, and this is something that I think I spoke to earlier, but, this is one of the major focal points of my coaching with each and every one of my clients, is that, you're far more than anything you do. And so that then sparks ideas for how they want to use the remainder of their life. And as you know, I mean, so many athletes are so young when their career ends. Yeah. They have, maybe 4 more chapters after, I don't know, like, or 5, so just having that light go on, where it's like, oh, there's something else that I love, and there's something else I want to pour my life force energy into, and then kind of helping them get some clarity on that. And it's not just career though. I think I'm speaking to identity a lot because like in my opinion, it's the guiding light here with everything. And it's actually kind of evolved too now since I became a mom, and I'm an older mom. I had my son at 46. But I started to get really curious about ways that I can support female athletes, specifically around all of the transitions that come with motherhood and balancing their career and making a decision for having a baby and timing and the social and emotional and the physical challenges that all come with that. So that's been something that's kind of like the newer thing that I've been doing lately, and I love it. So really supporting female athletes and in knowing that there's a space for them, and that they can get like some community support and then also professional support. And so many of my professional athletes who are female have thought like, well, I can't have a baby until my career is over. And so that's something else. Like we just, take a look at that. And I think a lot of women too are inspired by my story. The fact that I had my son when I was 46, and I didn't have to use any medical assistance with that. So I think that's also kind of a thing that women like to hear when they're thinking about wanting to have a family, but also are professional athletes.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting too, just listening to you sharing that now is just the whole adjusting, like on the maybe not on the fly, but like just looking at your business, and everybody. I mean, people make adjustments in life, and that's again, I think another skill set of an athlete, which is apparent here, is that you're making those adjustments to what's needed out there, and still serving the one area, but finding another area that you can help. Which is great.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's talk about, we've kind of probably talked about most of it, but talk about, your business today, your coaching business, and, ultimately how people can find you. I always talk about, I'll say in the beginning of the show, I kind of, I do that 30,000 foot view. Here's Erika, but now this is a little bit of like the commercial for Erika, but share with what you're doing and how you're reaching people, how they can find you.
Thanks. Yeah, so I'm located in Chicago, Illinois, but I have clients all over the world. We do the time zone thing. We meet via Zoom. There's lots of ways. I'm on Instagram at Erika Fay, which is real easy. People message me there. My website is a great way to get in contact with me. It's maximumachievementcoaching.com, which I know is a mouthful. I actually have, and I don't know when this is going to go live, but I actually have a masterclass coming up for elite female athletes. And the date for that is October 23rd. So that's complimentary. People can just message me if they want the registration link. And I'm happy to, have people email me or whatever, which I know is kind of old school, but I check my email. So, and it's Erika, and it's Erika at maximumachievementcoaching.com. So Instagram or email would probably be the surefire way to get in contact with me.
Gotcha. That's on October 23rd coming up?
Yep, October 23rd.
Okay, so we'll make sure we put this in the show notes, and I'll make a note. Okay, I got to make sure that we have this out there before that, so that take advantage of it. So now this has been great, Erika. You can find us at alumnidirect.com, and also I LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, X. But I really encourage people to watch or listen to the podcast. We're across all the podcast networks. We're also on our Alumni Direct YouTube channel, and we really want to get the message out to help athletes out. It's such a major issue today, and I love what you're doing, Erika. You're making a big impact in this area, and we want to do the same. We want to try to bring these athletes together, resources, and really make an impact. So thank you so much. It's been great having you.
Thanks. Thank you. And I love what you're doing too. I checked out your Alumni Direct website, and it's awesome. And so definitely happy to help in any way I can. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure.